I will occasionally look for co-op games I can play with my wife. When I found Remnant from the Ashes, I had no idea what the game is all about. I saw that it offered a co-op campaign and checked out 5 minutes of gameplay footage. That's all it took. So before I go deeper into the game itself, let's talk about it from a technical perspective. Remnant supports ultra-wide resolutions without any issues. You start it and it just works. Both 21:9 and 32:9 run quite well on it. I've only found one real issue, and that was the map screen. For some reason the map is very zoomed in when you play in ultra-wide, making it harder to orientate on. If you do play on full HD, for example, the map is just the right size. Luckily, the issue does not exist when it comes to the minimap, which is very valuable when you play on a large screen. The graphics look quite bland. It has 4 distinct worlds and they do look differently, but within them you will notice an extreme amount of reused assets, making any instance feel almost like a labyrinth. It's ironic because there's a place in the game known as the labyrinth, and that place is small and not at all confusing. But the rest of the game is mostly the same assets with the same enemies all the time. Sadly, this gets boring very quickly. The world is comprised of individual smaller areas which are sometimes extremely linear and only offer one entrance and one exit, well, with a few exceptions. They will have sometimes multiple branching paths, and there's always a checkpoint at the start of an area and at the exit of an area which allows you to quick travel. That luckily is very convenient. The problem is that since everything looks the same, you're mostly not going to have an idea where you were recently and where it is that you want to or need to go. I wasn't actually aware of this, but this game is clearly inspired by Dark Souls. It copies a vast amount of ideas from the series. The checkpoints I have mentioned are essentially bonfires. They refill your healing charges, they respawn all the enemies in the area, and as mentioned, allow you to fast travel. You have a somewhat high difficulty curve here. You'll mostly be facing difficult bosses, and your quests and story are as convoluted as they used to be in Dark Souls. While similar, the game is also very different. First of all, it's a co-op shooter designed with the idea of being played in a team. You have 3 classes, one specializing in long range, one mid-range, and one going for the close range with mostly melee attacks. My wife Sarah picked up the sniping class, while I decided to go up close and personal in the hopes of playing as a tank. This was a mistake. The game's melee is not good enough for you to have it as a viable choice for most situations and bosses. Your choice in class does not defy you by much, but it will determine your starting equipment and your one unique trait. My character, for example, received a trait which increases the strength of his melee attacks. I still made it work, but there were many times when I wished I had picked any of the other classes simply because they were much better choices overall. And speaking of traits, let's talk a bit about that, because the way you gain new unique traits is actually quite good. You get them from defeating bosses, but also as a consequence of things you do or things that happen to you as you play. For example, if you revive your teammates too often, you will receive a trait that enables you to revive faster with each point you invest into it. At one point, I interacted with a tree and it gave me a tree bark trait which increases my armor. In other words, as you progress through the game, you unlock more traits and thus be able to improve and personalize your character more. I've mentioned how the game is heavily inspired by Dark Souls, so the combat can be challenging, but let me make one thing clear. This game is much easier than Dark Souls. As long as you level up your items and your traits, you should be able to handle almost everything the game throws at you. What's unique about it is that it's a third-person shooter. As such, you'll do a lot of shooting and spend a lot of ammo. I mentioned that because your enemies will not be dropping that much of it back, and ammunition is not shared on pickup. This means that you have to decide who takes what bullets, and it has happened that we died simply because we ran out of them. Your enemies, on the other hand, have no such problems. Luckily, everything else is shared on pickup. Not only that, but actually each player gets their own items and everything else. So you see something, you pick it up, you get something, the other players get something of their own. It's a really nice system. It's not groundbreaking, but it's always nice to see it. I just wish it included the ammunition so that each of us got our own ammo. I was playing a lot as a melee character and we still ended up low on ammo. Imagine how things could have been if we both were using our guns actively at all times. Your character has a health bar and a stamina bar. Stamina is used for running or rolling. Surprisingly, attacking with a melee weapon costs no stamina, and neither does shooting a gun. You receive a special item which, just like the Estus flask in Dark Souls, is used to heal you. It has a few charges but can be replenished upon using a checkpoint. You can also upgrade it so that it stores more uses. What I absolutely hated was the fact that you can also use it when your health is full. I can't tell you how often I would press the wrong button and waste one of these things. Given the fact that reviving your fallen comrade costs one of them as well, any mistake leading to a wasted use is quite painful. They should have made it so it's not possible to use it when on full health. The character could have just said, I'm perfectly healthy, or I have no injuries, I don't require healing, something like that. Another combat related thing that I wanted to mention is the fact that you can place modifications on your weapons. These mods effectively give you a skill to use during combat. They are also your only skills that can be actively used. You have a sidearm and you have a main gun, so you can only have 2 skills from those 2 modded weapons. Pretty simple at first glance. The thing is, mods are hard to come by. You usually get them after defeating a boss, so don't expect that much in terms of having many mods. As a matter of fact, don't expect much in terms of having any equipment. The game only has a handful of weapons and armor available, so you are mostly expected to make do with what you have by upgrading them. It's quite disappointing because you will find items very rarely, and more often than not, these items will be underwhelming and worse than what you already have. Given how rare it is, one would expect that at least every find should be exciting. Well, no, it's not. You find only crap. Another issue I have is the critical strike in this game. You can crit enemies in 2 ways. One is to hit their weak spots, but oftentimes they are either protected. For example, an enemy will wear a makeshift helmet and shooting its head will require 2 shots to kill it rather than 1, where a heart and lung shot will dispatch it immediately if it's not wearing some kind of a vest. The other way to crit is simply by dumb luck. It happens sometimes, but it is so rare that you might as well try to play some lottery after it happens. And I know critical strikes should be rare in every game. I've played a ton of games. You don't have to think that I'm exaggerating. Trust me, it's just way too rare and doesn't feel like there's any way to somewhat increase it. You know how you can make a character that crits very often, stuff like that. Well, that's not happening here. Forget it. I did mention how the story is convoluted, but let me delve a bit deeper into that statement. It's really convoluted. There are monsters called the Root, and they pretty much go from realm to realm and destroy everyone. You try to defeat them. How are you going to do that? Unclear. Just like in Dark Souls, you don't have a journal or proper individual quests. You just get released into the world and that's pretty much it. While the map here isn't open as it was in Dark Souls, it still can be very confusing, especially when you don't know what the game wants you to do. It does branch out, you know, it doesn't just go completely linear from A to B. One path can have 3 paths and then those can have 2 each. And at some point you hit a dead end and you need to return. But it is a relatively hard game, not as hard as Dark Souls as said, but it's relatively hard. So it will take you a while to reach a dead end and then realize that you need to go back and do something else. Luckily, that dead end will usually feature a boss of some sort, so you do get some kind of a challenge and reward, but still, it's just very confusing. And that wouldn't be such a big problem if I just could return to the proper path after I've defeated those bosses. But believe me when I say that we got lost several times and wasted hours trying to find the proper way. And the reason for that is mostly that everything looks the same, and since the game never really tells you where you want to go, it's up to you to teleport somewhere and just start exploring again. It's a problem. It's not a good solution. The locations also feature shortcuts which can be opened to connect 2 places, similarly to Dark Souls again, but those seem to be absolutely redundant here since the maps are all individual areas with loading screens in betweens. What makes things worse is that the game just doesn't explain any of its deeper gameplay mechanics. All the status effects are a mystery. We actually found out that scoped weapons can be zoomed in after we had played more than 70% of the games. Yes, a gun with a scope, a sniper rifle. We didn't realize you could actually look through that scope. We thought you could, we tried to, but we couldn't figure it out for a while, for a very long while. Turns out this is due to the fact that one of the updates changed it, and in order to use the scope now, you must either bind the key yourself, so you go in and bind a new key, it's unbound, or you double click the right mouse button and hold it. Not just double click, you click and then click again and hold that click, and that's how it happens. It's absolutely counterintuitive. The stupidest thing I have ever seen, and we only found out about it from a loading screen tutorial message randomly very late into the game. Like I said, I suspected this should be possible initially, but we missed it somehow, and my wife played without it for a very long time. Let's just say there was a lot of ammo wasted due to headshots not hitting. You have no idea how many missed shots can be accreted to not knowing how to use sniper optics. This is something I will never understand from developers who copy the Souls-like experience. Why do they copy all the bad things with the good ones? Make a proper story. Explain your game mechanics better. The groundwork has been laid down for you in the past. Take what is good and improve upon the rest. Don't just copy it all like a parrot. So what about the bosses, you ask? Well, I have to say that they were mostly fun to fight. The game did that part well enough. Naturally, a game is more than the sum of its parts, so the most important question remains, is it fun to play altogether? The answer here is meh. It starts off interesting, but due to how repetitive it is, how you most mostly walk around aimlessly and how little there is to find and upgrade, it gets boring very quickly. Once you've beaten the game, you can replay it or play a bit of adventure mode. The latter is basically just like the rifts were in Diablo, but with less loot and less variety in terms of maps or enemies. It's actually just the same main game maps in almost every way. I can imagine that there are many people who thoroughly enjoyed this game and are replaying it and getting better at it. Perhaps some of them are even trying the hardcore mode, which features permadeath, but my wife and I are not amongst them. So should you play this game? Not at its current price. You shouldn't. It currently costs $40 on Steam, and after having played it, I feel like it's way too expensive. It doesn't look good enough, it isn't fun for long enough, and won't satisfy Dark Souls fans looking for their next fix. It's a curious thing, I'll give it that, and if you find it during a sale for around $20, it's definitely worth a try, but anything more is just too expensive. Just be sure to play it with friends, otherwise it will turn into a snooze fest within the first hour of playing. So, it would seem as though you have reached the end of this review. I thank you for watching it, but before we part ways, let me redirect your attention to my Patreon account. I publish links to free games there all the time, so check it out and you'll never miss a freebie again. And if you like my reviews, there's a lot more where that came from. Check out the link in the description for the Patreon account. In any case, have a great day and thank you for watching.